Elysium was meant to be humanity's beacon in the stars, a shining jewel of progress and unity. Located on the far edge of human-controlled space, the colony thrived despite its isolation. It was a testament to human resilience, built by pioneers and defended by those who understood the cost of survival. But in the cold void of space, there were always predators watching, waiting. The Fra Dominion had always viewed humanity as an anomaly, a species that refused to bow, that defied the natural order of submission that weaker civilizations should follow. To the Fra, strength was all that mattered, and in their eyes, humanity had yet to prove itself. Elysium was chosen as the proving ground, but it would not be a battle, it would be an extermination. The attack came without warning. The Fra warships emerged from the darkness of space, blotting out the stars with their monstrous silhouettes. The colony's defense systems had a brief moment to react, raising planetary shields and scrambling what little fleet they had. Commodore Elias Grant, a seasoned officer of the United Earth Navy, was in command of the system's meager forces. He knew they stood little chance against a full Dominion fleet, but surrender was not an option. "All units, hold the line! We delay them until evacuation is complete." Grant's voice was firm, despite the impending doom. His fleet, mostly outdated frigates and a single heavy cruiser, the UNS Resolute, stood between the Fra and the helpless civilians below. The first wave hit like a sledgehammer. The Dominion warships opened fire, unleashing a storm of plasma and kinetic rounds. The shields of the Resolute flared as they absorbed the initial volley, but the smaller frigates were not as fortunate. One after another, they were torn apart, their hulls splitting open like overripe fruit, spilling men and fire into the void. Grant clenched his fists, watching his fleet dwindle. "Redirect power to forward shields. Target their lead battleship. If we go down, we take as many of them as we can with us." His crew obeyed, launching a desperate counterattack. The Resolute's railguns fired in rapid succession, their slugs slamming into the lead for battleship's armor. A momentary victory as its shields flickered, but then the retaliation came. A lance of energy speared through the Resolute's hull, tearing decks apart. Grant barely had time to issue a final command before the bridge was consumed in fire and silence. With the fleet destroyed, the planetary defenses followed. The orbital stations were shattered, and the shield generators failed. The Fra warriors descended upon Elysium like carrion birds. Their drop pods rained from the sky, shaking the ground as they landed. The defenders, militia, police forces, and a few surviving Marines, mounted a desperate resistance in the streets of New Horizon, the capital city. Among them was Captain Adrian Cole, a decorated soldier who had refused evacuation. She and her men fought street by street, turning every building into a last stand. But the Fra were relentless, their warriors genetically engineered for battle, their armor impervious to small arms fire. The defenders fell by the hundreds. Cole's communicator crackled. "Captain, the eastern sector is gone. We're being overrun. Fall back to the command center. We hold there until the last transport is away," she barked, leading a retreat through the burning ruins. Above them, civilian ships launched in a desperate bid to escape. Some made it past the Fra blockade, but many were cut down by pursuing fighters. The sky was a graveyard of shattered hulls and burning debris. The massacre was total. By the time the last transmission from Elysium was received by Earth, it was too late. The colony was gone, its people slaughtered. The Fra Dominion had made its declaration: humanity was weak, unworthy of its place in the cosmos. But they had made a mistake. They had left survivors. The news of Elysium's destruction spread like wildfire across human space. The United Earth government, once fractured and hesitant, now had a singular purpose: revenge. The massacre had awakened something in humanity that the Fra had not expected, an unrelenting fury. And so, as the embers of Elysium faded, humanity prepared for war. The ruins of Elysium still smoldered in the cold silence of space, a graveyard of shattered ships and slaughtered civilians. The Galactic Council issued nothing but hollow condolences, their voices laced with the same empty diplomacy they had used to pacify humanity for decades. The massacre was an act of calculated extermination, a warning to humanity that they were nothing more than a minor species in the grand design of the cosmos. But the galaxy had underestimated humanity before, and now, in the ashes of their greatest tragedy, humanity made its silent vow, never again. The last transmission. Before Elysium fell, before the last civilian transport was eviscerated in the void, a final transmission was sent. It was grainy, broken by static and the panic screams of those who knew death had come for them. But one voice cut through the chaos, sharp and resolute. To any who survive. To those who hear this. Elysium has fallen. We are not victims. We are not weak. This is not our end. This is only the beginning. The transmission was intercepted by the UC, the United Earth Coalition, before it was silenced forever. What followed was the moment the galaxy should have feared, the day humanity chose war over survival. There would be no further negotiations. No peace talks. No desperate pleas to the Galactic Council. There would only be vengeance. The Council's response. The Galactic Union, a collection of hundreds of species bound together by a fragile peace, viewed humanity's grief with disinterest. The Fra Dominion, the empire responsible for the massacre, faced no consequences. The Council debated endlessly, their words as weightless as the void. They had long seen humanity as an anomaly, aggressive, unpredictable, too stubborn to conform to the Union's status quo. But what they failed to understand was that Elysium had not broken humanity. It had reforged them. In secret, the UC's highest command met in the depths of Sol's military installations. Generals, admirals, intelligence officers, and shadow operatives convened under the same unifying banner. The massacre had removed any barriers to war. Politics were set aside. Humanity's course had been decided. Project Revenant. The first response was immediate and brutal. Humanity's fleets began to mobilize under the banner of Project Revenant, a plan so ambitious, so absolute, that its very nature was an act of war. The UC knew that if they struck now, they had the element of surprise. Every shipyard across human space accelerated production. Advanced AI-driven warships, classified experimental projects, and new dreadnoughts unlike anything seen before were built with terrifying efficiency. Humanity had spent centuries reverse engineering alien technology, refining their own advancements, and now, with nothing left to lose, they unleashed their full might into a singular goal: retribution. But war was not won with firepower alone. The call for silence. A shadow war began before the first shots were fired. Humanity's intelligence network spread like a virus through the Galactic Union's communications, intercepting plans, mapping enemy fleet movements, embedding agents in the highest echelons of alien militaries. Every enemy species that had stood idle during the massacre was now a target. Every piece of information that could weaken the Union was extracted with cold precision. Humanity did not fight wars in the open until the killing blow was ready. Across the galaxy, whispers of disappearances and unexplained sabotage began to spread. Weapon stockpiles and FRA-controlled systems vanished overnight. High-ranking officials in the Dominion turned up dead, their bodies frozen in the void. Spaceports once bustling with trade found their supply lines mysteriously severed. The Fra Dominion's might, once unchallenged, was bleeding from 1,000 cuts it could not trace. Humanity's vow was not just to retaliate. It was to ensure that no one would see them coming. The hunt begins. One name rose to the surface of these operations: Harbinger. A warship of unknown classification, designed in complete secrecy, operated by the most advanced AI humanity had ever created. It did not exist on any official records. Its commanders were ghosts, moving between black sites and hidden installations. It had one purpose: to lead the first strike against the Fra Dominion. Its mission was simple: erase the Fra Dominion from the galaxy. And so, the hunt began. While the Galactic Union debated endlessly, humanity executed its plans with surgical precision. Human fleets dispersed, moving into position. Colonies that had remained hidden in deep space were activated. Covert bases, long abandoned, came to life with military activity. The Fraud Dominion believed they had broken humanity, but in truth, they had only set them free from the illusion of peace. The vow had been made. And soon, the silence before war would shatter. Remove headings. The ruins of Elysium still smoldered in the cold silence of space, a graveyard of shattered ships and slaughtered civilians. The Galactic Council issued nothing but hollow condolences, their voices laced with the same empty diplomacy they had used to pacify humanity for decades. The massacre was an act of calculated extermination, a warning to humanity that they were nothing more than a minor species in the grand design of the cosmos. But the galaxy had underestimated humanity before, and now, in the ashes of their greatest tragedy, humanity made its silent vow, never again. Before Elysium fell, before the last civilian transport was eviscerated in the void, a final transmission was sent. It was grainy, broken by static and the panic screams of those who knew death had come for them. But one voice cut through the chaos, sharp and resolute. To any who survive. To those who hear this. Elysium has fallen. We are not victims. We are not weak. This is not our end. This is only the beginning. The transmission was intercepted by the UEC, the United Earth Coalition, before it was silenced forever. What followed was the moment the galaxy should have feared, the day humanity chose war over survival. There would be no further negotiations. No peace talks. No desperate pleas to the Galactic Council. There would only be vengeance. The Galactic Union, a collection of hundreds of species bound together by a fragile peace, viewed humanity's grief with disinterest. The Fraud Dominion, the empire responsible for the massacre, faced no consequences. The council debated endlessly, their words as weightless as the void. They had long seen humanity as an anomaly, aggressive, unpredictable, too stubborn to conform to the Union's status quo. But what they failed to understand was that Elysium had not broken humanity. It had reforged them. In secret, the UC's highest command met in the depths of Sol's military installations. Generals, admirals, intelligence officers, and shadow operatives convened under the same unifying banner. The massacre had removed any barriers to war. Politics were set aside. Humanity's course had been decided. The first response was immediate and brutal. Humanity's fleets began to mobilize under the banner of Project Revenant, a plan so ambitious, so absolute, that its very nature was an act of war. The UC knew that if they struck now, they had the element of surprise. Every shipyard across human space accelerated production. Advanced AI-driven warships, classified experimental projects, and new dreadnoughts unlike anything seen before were built with terrifying efficiency. Humanity had spent centuries reverse engineering alien technology, refining their own advancements, and now, with nothing left to lose, they unleashed their full might into a singular goal: retribution. But war was not won with firepower alone. A shadow war began before the first shots were fired. Humanity's intelligence network spread like a virus through the Galactic Union's communications, intercepting plans, mapping enemy fleet movements, embedding agents in the highest echelons of alien militaries. Every enemy species that had stood idle during the massacre was now a target. Every piece of information that could weaken the Union was extracted with cold precision. Humanity did not fight wars in the open until the killing blow was ready. Across the galaxy, whispers of disappearances and unexplained sabotage began to spread. Weapon stockpiles and frog-controlled systems vanished overnight. High-ranking officials in the Dominion turned up dead, their bodies frozen in the void. Spaceports once bustling with trade found their supply lines mysteriously severed. The Fraud Dominion's might, once unchallenged, was bleeding from 1,000 cuts it could not trace. Humanity's vow was not just to retaliate. It was to ensure that no one would see them coming. One name rose to the surface of these operations: Harbinger. A warship of unknown classification, designed in complete secrecy, operated by the most advanced AI humanity had ever created. It did not exist on any official records. Its commanders were ghosts, moving between black sites and hidden installations. It had one purpose: to lead the first strike against the Fraud Dominion. Its mission was simple. erased the Fraud Dominion from the galaxy. And so, the hunt began. While the Galactic Union debated endlessly, humanity executed its plans with surgical precision. Human fleets dispersed, moving into position. Colonies that had remained hidden in deep space were activated. Covert bases, long abandoned, came to life with military activity. The Fraud Dominion believed they had broken humanity, but in truth, they had only set them free from the illusion of peace. The vow had been made. And soon, the silence before war would shatter. The silence of space had always been humanity's greatest asset. Where other species in the galaxy relied on overwhelming firepower or superior numbers, humanity had learned to master the void. The Silent War was named for a reason. As the war escalated, humanity refused to fight in the ways expected by their enemies. And now, after years of being hunted, humanity was ready to strike back in full force. For years, the enemy had been methodical in their extermination. They believed humanity to be a nuisance, a lesser species barely worth the effort of destruction. Their fleets moved with surgical precision, their dreadnoughts scouring colonies with relentless efficiency. But something had changed. Reports of entire enemy flotillas disappearing without a trace began circulating among the Fraud Dominion leadership. Their intelligence networks detected no battles, no distress signals, only silence. In reality, the truth was far more terrifying. Humanity had evolved beyond their expectations. No longer were they simply running. Now they were hunting. Deep in the void, beyond the Dominion's reach, humanity had built something new. The Phantom Fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. It was composed of entirely stealth-capable warships, each designed for hit-and-run warfare. Their hulls were coated in metamaterials that bent light and radar waves, making them effectively invisible to conventional scanners. Their engines emitted no thermal signatures, running on an advanced fusion drive that dispersed energy into space, leaving no trail. Leading this fleet was Admiral Ethan Rains, a man who had once watched his homeworld burn. He had spent years in exile, preparing for this moment. He and his fleet had one objective: to turn the hunter into the hunted. The Dominion had grown complacent. They believed they had all but eliminated the human threat, with only scattered resistance remaining in the fringes of space. That illusion was shattered in an instant. At the edge of Dominion-controlled space, the shipyards of Varkis Prime were a critical hub for their war machine. It was here that their fleets were built and repaired, ensuring their continued dominance. It was also here that humanity would make their move. The assault began without warning. The Phantom Fleet emerged from the blackness of space like ghosts, their weapons already primed. The first wave of attacks crippled the station's defensive grid before a single alarm could be raised. Railguns tore through the hulls of docked battleships, setting off a chain reaction of explosions that engulfed the shipyard in fire and debris. Dominion forces scrambled to respond, but they found themselves fighting shadows. The Phantom Fleet struck and vanished, slipping away before enemy reinforcements could arrive. When the battle ended, Varkis Prime was nothing more than twisted metal and drifting wreckage. The Fraud Dominion had never encountered an enemy that fought like this. The concept of stealth warfare was alien to them. In their arrogance, they had believed overwhelming force was the only path to victory. Now they were forced to adapt. Fleet Marshal Kale Varos, one of the Dominion's most decorated strategists, was tasked with stopping the human insurgency. His solution was simple: total war. He ordered entire sectors to be locked down, deploying sensor drones and patrol fleets to sweep every system suspected of harboring humans. Planets were blockaded, and entire populations were held under suspicion. Yet, for all their efforts, they found nothing. The Phantom Fleet continued its campaign, striking supply convoys, shipyards, and isolated outposts before vanishing without a trace. Humanity was no longer simply fighting for survival. They were dismantling the Dominion's infrastructure piece by piece. Beyond the destruction of military assets, the psychological toll on the Dominion was immense. Their species had never faced an enemy they could not see, could not predict, and could not retaliate against. Paranoia spread like wildfire among their ranks. Captains refused to venture beyond secured sectors, fearing they would be the next to disappear. Morale among the Dominion fleet plummeted as whispers of the ghosts of humanity spread through their ranks. To deepen this fear, humanity employed a new kind of warfare, one designed to sow discord from within. Hacked communications were manipulated to spread disinformation, making Dominion officers question their own command structure. Some ships even received false orders, sending them into ambushes that cost them dearly. For the first time in the war, the Fra Dominion was afraid. As the Dominion reeled from the Phantom Fleet's relentless attacks, humanity prepared for its next phase. The raids had been just the beginning. Their true goal was to strike at the heart of the Dominion itself. Deep within human-controlled space, a new weapon was being prepared. A warship unlike any before it, designed to bring the Dominion to its knees. It was not just a vessel, it was a message. Humanity was not defeated. Humanity was not gone. And soon, the Dominion would learn what it meant to face an enemy that refused to be erased. The Phantom Fleet had proven its worth, striking deep into Fra Dominion space with brutal efficiency. Every attack was a statement, every disappearance a whisper of human defiance. The Fra were beginning to fray at the edges, paranoia creeping into their once unshakable war machine. Yet, despite their growing unease, they still vastly outnumbered humanity. If the tide was truly to turn, a new strategy had to be implemented, one that would break the Fra from within. Human intelligence networks had spent decades studying the Fra, analyzing their social structures, military doctrines, and psychological profiles. While the Fra presented themselves as an unyielding warlike species, humanity's deep dives into their history uncovered a crucial weakness. The Fra were not a unified people. Among their ranks were subjugated species, lesser races forced into servitude beneath the Fra banner. Though the Fra dominated them through superior technology and brutal governance, resentment simmered beneath the surface. If properly stoked, that resentment could transform into full-scale rebellion. The Phantom Fleet's next objective was not merely to destroy Fra assets, but to fracture their empire from the inside. Humanity would not just be a thorn in their side, they would be the spark that ignited the blaze. Using stealth vessels, human operatives infiltrated Fra-controlled worlds, making contact with the oppressed races. The most promising of these were the Theri, a reptilian species that had been forcibly annexed into the Dominion generations ago. Though fierce warriors in their own right, the Theri had long been denied the ability to rise within the Fra military hierarchy, relegated to frontline shock troops and disposable laborers. Through encrypted communications and well-placed sabotage operations, humanity whispered in the ears of the Theri leadership. They provided them with stolen Fra military schematics, weapon stockpiles, and most importantly, hope. The first major Theri uprising took place on the fortress world of Gorath 7, a key logistics hub for Fra operations in the sector. In a single night, the Theri turned their weapons on their Fra overseers, storming command centers and cutting off planetary defenses. When the Fra attempted to send reinforcements, they found their supply routes crippled, courtesy of targeted Phantom Fleet strikes. Within days, 3 more Theri-populated worlds followed suit, plunging the sector into chaos. The Dominion's forces scrambled to contain the insurrection, but in doing so, they exposed themselves to further Phantom Fleet ambushes. The war had entered a new phase, and the Fra were bleeding from within. Reeling from the sudden uprising, the Fra Dominion resorted to the only strategy they knew: overwhelming force. Entire battalions were rerouted from the front lines to quell the rebellions, leaving critical systems vulnerable to human strikes. But even with their vast armada, they struggled to regain control. The insurgents, backed by human advisors, waged a guerrilla war that bled the Fra dry. Frustrated and desperate, the Dominion issued a chilling decree: genocide. Any Theri world suspected of rebellion would be subjected to orbital bombardment, their populations eradicated to set an example. It was a ruthless but effective method, one that had cemented the Fra's dominance for centuries. Humanity, however, had anticipated this move. The Phantom Fleet accelerated its operations, launching simultaneous assaults on Fra bombardment fleets before they could unleash their destruction. It was a race against time, with the fate of entire worlds hanging in the balance. The defining moment of this campaign came at Epsilon Crucis, where a massive fleet prepared to exterminate the Theri population of an entire moon colony. Expecting minimal resistance, the fleet moved into bombardment formation, only to be ambushed by the full might of the Phantom Fleet. It was the largest engagement of the war thus far. While human ships were still outnumbered, they wielded superior tactics, striking key command vessels and using electronic warfare to blind the sensors. Swarms of autonomous drones overwhelmed the enemy's defensive grids, slipping through their formations and delivering pinpoint strikes on vulnerable systems. For the first time, the experienced what it meant to be prey. Their fleet, designed for brute force engagements, found itself outmaneuvered at every turn. The battle raged for hours, but by the end, the forces were shattered. The Phantom Fleet stood victorious, and the moon colony was saved. The Battle of Epsilon Crucis was more than just a military victory, it was a symbol. News of the Fra's defeat spread across the Dominion like wildfire. The oppressed species saw the cracks in their overlord's armor and began to rise. Even within the Fra themselves, doubt took root. If the Dominion was not as invincible as they claimed, then perhaps their reign was not as eternal as they believed. Humanity, once seen as a minor nuisance, had become a beacon of defiance. The silent war was no longer just a war, it was a revolution. And it was far from over. The war had reached a point of no return. Humanity, once thought to be nothing more than a minor species in the grand tapestry of the galactic order, had proven itself capable of surviving the silent war against the oppressive Dominion. But surviving was no longer enough. It was time to push forward, to seize the offensive, and to ensure that the atrocities committed against their people would never be repeated. Part 6 of this saga explores the decisive battles, the sacrifices made, and the strategic brilliance that led humanity to the edge of ultimate victory. As the war raged on, humanity's leaders realized that pure attrition was not an option. The Dominion, though weakened by constant guerrilla tactics and sabotage, still had numerical superiority. To turn the tide decisively, humanity needed to shift from reactive to proactive warfare. Admiral Jonas Richter, the mastermind behind humanity's naval tactics, devised an ambitious plan, Operation Phantom Storm. The goal was not to defend but to strike at the heart of the Dominion's supply lines. Targeting their logistics would cripple their ability to sustain the war. Without food, weapons, and reinforcements, their fleets would begin to crumble from within. Using a network of hidden bases, human strike teams launched precision raids on Dominion depots, communication hubs, and key manufacturing worlds. Small, stealthy ships slipped past enemy lines, delivering sabotage teams who planted explosives and hacked into Dominion infrastructure. The chaos that followed forced the enemy to divert massive resources to internal security, stretching their front lines dangerously thin. Vorkath Prime was a world considered invincible. It served as the Dominion's primary shipyard, churning out warships at an industrial scale. For decades it had been protected by some of the most advanced defenses in the galaxy. But even the greatest fortress has its weakness. Commander Evelyn Drake, one of humanity's most daring officers, led the assault on Vorkath Prime. Using stolen Dominion transponders, human ships masqueraded as a returning fleet, slipping past planetary defenses undetected. The moment they were within range, they unleashed hell. Precision orbital strikes targeted fuel reserves, while infiltrators disabled shield generators from within. As explosions rocked the shipyards, human forces swept through the planet's key installations, leaving no room for recovery. The Dominion's response was immediate and ferocious, but it was too late. Vorkath Prime burned, its once proud shipyards reduced to smoldering wreckage. With its destruction, the Dominion's ability to reinforce its fleets was shattered. Victory came at a cost. Captain Michael Carter, one of the most respected officers in the human fleet, sacrificed his vessel, the U.S. Resolute, to buy time for evacuation ships. With his crew unwilling to abandon him, they fought until the very end, taking down a Dominion dreadnought with them in a fiery last stand. On the ground, resistance fighters like Sarah Imani and Lieutenant Hector Valdez led sabotage missions, knowing full well that capture meant execution. Their actions crippled Dominion command structures, paving the way for larger victories. Their names became legend, whispered with reverence by soldiers and civilians alike. The destruction of Vorkath Prime sent shockwaves through the Dominion hierarchy. Infighting broke out among their leaders, some demanding retaliation while others sought a way out of the war. Supply shortages became catastrophic, forcing Dominion warships to abandon offensives due to lack of fuel and ammunition. Desertion skyrocketed. Many Dominion officers, seeing the inevitable collapse, surrendered to human forces rather than die for a lost cause. Some defected outright, offering intelligence in exchange for asylum. Humanity, once on the brink of annihilation, now found itself in a position of strength. With momentum on their side, humanity prepared for the final push. Intelligence reports indicated that the Dominion's core worlds were vulnerable. If humanity struck hard enough, they could force a surrender and end the war for good. The U.S. Harbinger, humanity's most advanced warship, led the charge. Equipped with the latest in human ingenuity, adaptive AI, precision railguns, and energy-shielded hull plating, it represented the peak of Earth's wartime evolution. Fleet after fleet of human ships surged forward, smashing through the last of the Dominion's defensive lines. Ground forces landed on enemy strongholds, engaging in brutal urban warfare. The Dominion, once mighty, now found itself outmaneuvered and outgunned. The Dominion's Supreme Chancellor, Valrax, refused to surrender. He gathered what remained of his loyal fleets at the capital world of Duth-Kurath, determined to make humanity pay for every inch of ground they took. The battle that followed was one of the bloodiest in galactic history. Duth-Kuratha's orbital defenses were formidable, but humanity had learned from every battle fought. Using electronic warfare and overwhelming firepower, human ships tore through the outer defenses, paving the way for ground forces to land. Street by street, building by building, human soldiers fought against the Dominion's final defenders. The city of Kultor burned as plasma fire and railgun rounds turned skyscrapers into rubble. The Dominion fought with the desperation of a dying empire, but humanity refused to back down. As the dust settled, Valrax was captured, his empire in ruins. The silent war was over. Humanity had emerged victorious, not just as survivors, but as a rising power in the galaxy. The lessons learned through bloodshed would shape the future, ensuring that no force, no empire, would ever threaten them again. But victory came with consequences. The galaxy had changed forever, and humanity's place in it was now uncertain. Would they seek peace, or had war become too deeply ingrained in their culture? Only time would tell. For now, though, the silent war was over, and humanity had won. The final battle was upon them. Across the void of space, the combined might of humanity's fleets, bolstered by defectors from alien races who had seen the truth, faced the last remnants of the galactic hegemony. The once mighty rulers of the cosmos had been reduced to a desperate, fractured force. What had started as a campaign of extermination against humanity had turned into their own slow extinction. At the heart of it all stood the Harbinger, the AI-controlled warship that had guided humanity's rise. Its intelligence, honed through war and adaptation, had become the single greatest strategic mind the galaxy had ever seen. Coordinating fleets with mathematical precision, predicting enemy movements before they happened, and manipulating the very fabric of war, Harbinger was the key to humanity's ultimate victory. But the hegemony still had one last card to play. The last stand. The enemy fleet had gathered around their final stronghold, an artificial world built from the remains of conquered civilizations. A planet-sized fortress bristling with weaponry, surrounded by the last of the hegemony's warships. If humanity was to end this war, they would have to crack open this impenetrable fortress and shatter the enemy's last hope of survival. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood aboard the bridge of the Eternal Resolve, humanity's flagship. Around her, officers coordinated the battle, their faces steeled for what was to come. On the screen before her, a holographic representation of the battlefield flickered. "We have them where we want them," Vasquez said. "But that fortress, it's not just a stronghold. It's a doomsday weapon." Harbinger's voice echoed through the comms. "Analysis complete," Enemy station contains an Omega-class weapon capable of destabilizing subspace. If detonated, it will render faster-than-light travel impossible across the sector. A final act of destruction. They'd rather drag us all down with them than admit defeat, Vasquez muttered. We can't let that happen. Agreed, Harbinger responded. Executing counter-strategy. Harbinger's Gambit. As humanity's fleet engaged the last of the enemy's warships, Harbinger initiated a daring maneuver. Using drone swarms, electronic warfare, and predictive algorithms, it created phantom signals to trick the enemy into repositioning their defenses. At the same time, stealth frigates moved in under the cover of the battle, slipping past the enemy's defenses and infiltrating the station. On board the lead infiltration vessel, Captain Arya Cade and her strike team prepared for the most dangerous mission of their lives. Their objective: disable the Omega-class weapon before it could be fired. The corridors of the station were crawling with enemy forces, elite warriors willing to fight to the last. As Cade's team pushed through, gunfire echoed in the dimly lit halls. The fighting was brutal, but humanity had become something far deadlier than the hegemony ever expected. The same desperation the hegemony had forced upon humanity was now turned against them. With only minutes to spare, Cade reached the control chamber. The weapons activation sequence had begun. Harbinger, we need a shutdown sequence now, Cade shouted as she and her team fought to hold the room. Working. Firewall bypassed. Counter command initiated, Harbinger responded. The weapons core began to destabilize. Instead of destroying FTL travel for the sector, it began a localized collapse, one that would consume only the station. Get out now! Harbinger commanded. Cade and her team sprinted for the evac shuttle as the station began to collapse in on itself. Outside, the last enemy warships, leaderless and broken, began to flee or surrender. The war was over. The reckoning. As the fires of battle faded, the galaxy was forever changed. The hegemony, which had once ruled without question, had been shattered. In its place, humanity stood as the new power among the stars. But there was no celebration. Too much had been lost. Too many had died. On Earth, the leaders of humanity gathered to decide the fate of the galaxy. Some called for total conquest, to ensure no species would ever again threaten humanity's existence. Others urged restraint, believing that the cycle of oppression had to end. Harbinger, the entity that had orchestrated humanity's survival, had its own thoughts. It had learned from humanity not just the art of war, but the complexities of morality. We must not become what we fought against, Harbinger advised. We have the power to remake the galaxy. Let us do so wisely. And so, instead of empire, humanity forged a new order, one where cooperation replaced tyranny, where the lessons of the past shaped the future. As the final embers of war faded, a new era began. Humanity had survived. Humanity had won. And the stars would never be the same again.